So what we're going to do is we're going to take a problem and we are going to try to think a little bit more carefully about the process. So one last really quick example. The basketball coach is paid to coach the team to wins, right? So coach the team has the next game coming up. Does the coach understand the problem? What is the problem for the coach at that point? The problem is there's another team, and the goal is Moorhead wins and not the other team, right? And so the coach understands the problem, and the coach is paid pretty well to understand that problem, right? So what does the coach do? Comes up with a game plan. What happens on game day? The players have to execute the plan, right? And then what happens at the end of the game? Okay, so at the end of the game, two things can happen. Either the team wins or the team loses. So let's say the team wins. If the team wins, do we still have to look back? Yeah, we still have to look back. Did the players execute correctly? Well, can you win and not execute correctly? Yeah, you could play horribly and still win the game, right? So even if you got the right answer at the end, you still might need to look back at the plan, the execution of the plan. Well, what if the players executed perfectly in the game and they won the game? Does that mean that it was a good plan? Not necessarily. The team may have won by 2 points when they could have won by 50 with a different plan, right? So that's an issue. Okay, so what happens otherwise if we had lost the game? The coach looks back. Does it mean that the players didn't execute correctly? Not necessarily. The players could have played perfectly well. Maybe it was a bad plan. Well, what if it was executed perfectly and it was a good plan? Could the problem be back here? Yeah, maybe the other team was just that good, right? Next team up happens to be UK instead of whoever it really is, right? What happens? No matter how well the players play, what's probably going to happen? In that case, the problem is just out of reach, right? It's just not really possible. All right, last scenario of this. Several years ago, I was driving a student to, a group of students to a conference, 10-hour drive. And in the car we're driving, and one person keeps talking about hating her job and going on and on. And at the time I said, you know, hey, I really like my job. If I could do my job and be able to eat, I would do it for free. I loved what I was doing. And we went for like 50 miles back and forth with this kind of bickering about, you know, jobs and oh, that's not possible, and on and on. And so finally, I started thinking about, let's be focused about this. What do you mean by job? And she said, a job is something you do that you don't like to do that you get paid a lot of money for. Okay, so with that definition, can you like your job?
No.
No, it's something you do that you don't like to do. Can you be willing to do a job for free? No, because you have to get paid a lot of money for it to be a job. So what happened in that situation, as soon as I understood the problem, her definition of job was different than my definition of job. The problem was solved. Right? Because as soon as I understood the problem, it was like, oh, I see, I don't have to devise a plan now, I understand. I don't agree with your definition of job, but everything you said for the past 50 miles makes sense now. I understand where you're coming from. So how did I apply that in future? Now looking around, anytime there's a conflict with someone, you check to make sure, are we talking about the same thing? Are our definitions the same? Right? And that's the real life kind of application. Okay, so we're going to look at a completely contrived situation and think about these steps as we're going through. Which of these is the most important? Understanding the problem. You can't do anything if you don't understand the problem, right? But you can understand problems all day long if you don't have any idea how to get started. You can't really devise any plans, so you can't make any more progress, right? So devising a plan is pretty important. Well, you can come up with great ideas, but if you don't know how to do any of it, if you can't execute any of it, well, execution is pretty important. Well, if you can't check your answers at the end, then what good was any of it? You don't know whether they're right or not. So looking back and around is pretty important. Which is most important? All of them, right? They're all equally important. As people, what do we tend to do when we're faced with a problem? Where do we go in the steps? Something comes up. What do you do first?
The quickest and easiest way out.
What do we usually end up doing? We usually end up skipping straight to that step, don't we? We start to do something. How many times have you had an argument with a friend or family member because you didn't really know what was going on and just kind of jumped in to the middle of things, right? How many times do we just jump straight to trying to do something, right? So if we stop and think about the problem, figure out what we're going to do before we start doing. Okay. So